You're now plugged into the Delphi podcast.
Hey everyone, it's Tommy from Delphi Ventures, and today I'm joined by my partner José and Pondering Durian, who's leading up our new initiative called Delphi Intelligence. It's one of the most exciting things we've ever done, and I'm really excited to talk to both of them about this. As a quick recap, for Delphi's broad efforts in AI, we've invested over $25 million at the intersection of crypto AI over the past 3 years. We've hosted dozens of AI leaders on our podcast. Pondering Durian has created 6 foundational reports on crypto AI at our research company, and Jose, Luke, Kevin, and the team have led 2 AI cohorts in Delphi Labs. Despite this, I still think Delphi Intelligence is one of the coolest and most exciting initiatives we've ever done in AI, and I'm really excited for it. So Delphi Intelligence will be our free AI research hub, where we're focused on sharing our own AI research and the research of other really smart folks in the field across all the domains of AI. We're going to include AI, robotics, frontier models, all the subsets, including text, voice, video, and a wide range of technical and non-technical topics. So today I'm joined by Jose and Pondering Durian, who I have the pleasure of asking questions to. These 2 guys are ridiculously smart at the intersection of AI, crypto, macro, and much more. Shameless shills here, but if you want to read the research, visit delphiintelligence.io to sign up. And if you're an early stage founder seeking funding, feel free to get in touch with me or anyone else on the team. With that, let's dive into the episode. Jose, PD, how's it going?
All good,
Doing
man.
well. Thanks.
Happy to be
Thanks
here.
for having us on.
Yeah. PD, why don't you give a brief overview on Delphi Intelligence, then we'll dive into hot takes on AI.
Yeah, sure. So I guess the genesis or the playbook for Delphi Intelligence is kind of roughly similar to what Delphi did on the crypto side, maybe starting back in 2017, 2018, but just seems like there is a gap in the market between very technical papers on the one hand and then kind of quick TLDR update newsletter types on the other. And it does seem like there's a gap that, an institution like Delphi can fill by basically marrying the two and going deep in a bunch of different areas. So for instance, we just dropped a paper or an essay on video models. We have another one on reinforcement learning. We have another one on AI browsers. And that'll just continue, basically on a weekly basis, dropping large reports that are very similar to what Delphi has done on the crypto side, but just focused on topics in AI, in robotics, and other emerging fields. And I think it's also going to be very complementary to Delphi kind of expanding into a lot of these domains from an investment perspective. So it is kind of classic Delphi DNA, starting with research and going deep in the areas that we are excited about, and then also hopefully surfacing some interesting investment opportunities while we do that. And so, yeah, I'm super excited. Obviously I've been working with the partners quite a bit, have been building out our internal AI focused team, and launching this week was super exciting. So excited to hit the ground running.
Zay, how do you feel about intelligence? I'm curious what you would want to see posted on the site for you to read.
Yeah. I mean, I'm super pumped about intelligence. I kind of said this in the thread that we did this week. But yeah, I had my sort of the moment that pilled me on crypto was this guy. I actually don't think I can dox him, but he's on Twitter, Coley B. He kind of pilled me on Ethereum, and pretty much since that week, I was just down the rabbit hole, and it was immediately I thought this is the most important and interesting tech I've ever seen. I need to devote my whole career and all my capital to it. And the only other time I felt like that since was reading situational awareness last year. Like I was already pretty bullish on AI. Obviously, you were in it very early, Tommy, and helping us all get up to speed. But that paper really like solidified it for me. And since then, kind of been thinking about like reading a lot, playing with it, investing in it, and just realized the best way that first of all, it's in a similar spot to I think where crypto was in 2017, despite that might be weird to some people, but I think there's a lot of sort of experts in individual areas, but there's very few places you can go to get a good overview of what's happening and like kind of actionable like alpha packed research, I think at this point. And then yeah, so I just think the best way to the way we always do things at Delphi, once we get nerd sniped, you go down the rabbit hole, you do research that helps you get conviction, and then we can kind of deploy capital against that. And I think that's kind of the goal here, to understand like AI really deeply, find some of the best researchers to both write about it within Delphi, and then also curate, because unlike Delphi research, this is going to be free. So also curate some of the best research that we find around the web on this stuff. But yeah, the thing I'd most like to see is just um, it's a good question. It sort of varies depending on the time. I'd love to see a report on robotics. Like I actually discussed this with PD maybe like a year ago, even, or definitely a few months
He's
ago.
still waiting on it,
Having
PD.
I think
Hurry
that
up.
that year ago was literally like last week, but
Slight
yeah.
comment.
Yeah.
No. When before the humanoid robotics became a thing, because there's a whole thing, I think, an interesting one in robotics, just about humanoids versus like specialized robots, and like the trade-offs between them. So obviously with the humanoid, they can do way more stuff. The whole world is built for humans. You can get economies of scale on the manufacturing, get them really cheap. But the specialized robots can be much more efficient in specific things, right? And specialized robots is how most factories work now. Like mechanical arms, transport robots, all this kind of stuff. And so I think it's interesting to try and think like, okay, within manufacturing, how many, like, what stuff is a humanoid useful for? And then sort of quantifying like what are the economies of scale you can get on producing a humanoid versus the efficiency gains you can get on specific tasks from specialized robots. Because yeah, I think it's like there's smart people on both sides, I'd say. So I think it's an interesting report, but there's loads of ones like this in different verticals, I think. Yeah.
So, so yeah, I guess I would just say that before Delphi Intelligence, I spent a lot of time doing tech investing, and it was basically, a mix of infrastructure and enterprise software, or infrastructure software, or vertical application, or consumer internet companies. And it was basically just like, hey, what do your unit economics look like? What does the TAM look like? Can we scale this business? And frankly, it was like super lame and cookie cutter. And until about like 3 to 5 years ago, that started changing. And now you wake up every day and you're like a kid in a candy store. There's like too many things to pick from in terms of really cool stuff that we could be writing long form reports about. And so it's not like there's a shortage of topics, from like robotics to bio to brain computer interfaces to AI and materials. Like literally it's just nonstop across all of these different verticals. You're seeing so much change. And so that's one of the reasons I'm super excited about intelligence, is like the pace of change in every single industry and vertical is being transformed. And so, it's impossible to be a master in all of them, but I do think you can, with focus, get up to speed relatively quickly and help others do the same. And that's kind of what we want to do.
Yeah, you're gonna be busy, dude.
I know.
You're gonna be busy. You
I
might
know.
have to stop writing your erotic fan fiction stuff. Maybe just take a break.
I mean, that's my late night.
Hey, it's
wind
good
down.
fan fiction, though.
It is good fan
I need
fiction.
more chapters. Come on.
Yeah, not those kind of robots, please, PD. Just a report on normal robots.
I'm excited for my first pod. Yeah.
This can count as
Yeah,
a
no.
trial run for your podcast.
There's one report actually that Anil's been talking about that I think is a really cool topic of like what's the next Mag 7 basically. Obviously, there's been like more and more turnover in the Mag 7 over the last few decades. Actually, not sure if that's true. He said that. That doesn't seem right to me, at least in the last two, but maybe it is.
He was convincing though.
He was convincing. Yeah, he was. I guess Netflix and stuff, and then Nvidia. There has been, yeah, I guess there has been quite a lot of turnover, but it would be, and like, what's the next Mag 7 look like? Like, assuming there's going to be even more turnover. I think it was A16Z that, like Mark Andreessen said back in the day, software is eating the world, and I think they've like adapted it to software is eating software now. Like software ate the world, and now AI is going to eat sort of trad software, and I really do buy that. Like that you're going to have entirely new apps, flows, like that it's going to look entirely different in 5 years. And with intelligence, we really want to try and like map that from, yeah. And with all this stuff, like whenever you're going into something new, you just have to kind of start somewhere, right? And then build up nodes of knowledge and the tree of knowledge, or like Anil always talks about the elephant. getting as many hands on the elephant as possible. He likes his
Well, Zay,
elephant groping metaphors.
Zay, how do you feel though about like obviously OpenAI had like pure straight dominance. Now Gemini and Google has released like nonstop AI releases. Like Zuckerberg's taking all the talent. Grok is like topping humanity's last exam. It seems like the new Mag 7 might just be the old Mag 7. Like what would change your views on OpenAI, Anthropic, X replacing them?
I mean, X isn't an old Mac 7 though, right? That would be a new one. XAI with Grok. And I think OpenAI has to be like a good contender to be in the new Mac 7.
Agreed.
They're building so like their models. I mean, I still think O3 is my favorite model. Grok 4 is pretty dope, and especially like a lot of the 300 a month or whatever it is tier is really cool with like the multi-agent stuff. But OpenAI is just crushing it, and also on product. Like they have the all the app integrations now. They're building this hardware thing with Johnny Ive, which I do think is the end game. Like having a thing that's listening to you constantly. Yeah, I mean, I think the right way to play AI, or at least the way that I've settled on now, is to have some exposure just to the big liquid AI companies that are playing AI well, which is not Mag 7 because I think Apple wouldn't be in there. So it's like, you know, the Googles, the Microsofts, the Metas, and then having some exposure to sort of the private market, like beta companies, so the labs, or the obvious ones. Then if you want to go further down the risk curve, maybe some of the earlier stage stuff, some of the neocloud stuff, whatever. And then I think having some true early stage exposure, either via direct investment, which is obviously really hard, or just through like fund of funds or something along those lines. And that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. And there's some argument that you could just like do a lot less work and capture most of it with the first two, you know, like just ape the labs and big tech, and you're kind of good. But I was doing some research the other day, and I realized like the market cap of private AI companies, total market cap is something around, I think it's something around 700 billion. With
So low.
Yeah, which is like a
It's a
fifth of crypto,
Yeah, that's like
right?
a third of a Meta or a Google.
Yeah, and like it's a fifth of like total crypto market cap, which just, I mean, obviously there's like publicly traded companies that you'd have to add in to capture some of this, but still, I think that number is gonna like 10 to 100x over the next sort of decade or two.
Yeah. But like, I guess playing off that, like I don't think it has to be a Mag 7. Like I think more companies
Yeah.
can enter that tier. And like I guess that's the Coatue thesis. That's like instead of what is the Mag 7, like what is the Mag 25? And what are the companies that make the leap like the Mag 7 guys did, that get on the right side of, you know, increasing model capabilities and have defensible moats that go from $500 billion companies to $5 trillion companies over the next like 5 to 7 years. And yeah, I think at the later stages, that's a really smart way to play the market. So yeah.
And it's interesting because AI doesn't, the new AI companies don't really have network effects in the same way as like a Google or a Meta, like the social media companies, right? Where it's just like impossible to unseat. They sort of have more like traditional industrial like economies of scale, right? Where they have like hardware and like data advantages and stuff like this, which is obviously also very hard to displace. But I do think there can be more. Like you're right that there can sort of be more than 7. And like yeah, the trillion or multi-trillion dollar question is like, who is going to be in there?
That's the hard part for me though with the web, the traditional FANG, like or sorry, the traditional Mag 7 is we always say that new companies will come and disrupt the old ones, but the new companies have so much, or the old companies have so much cash, like Facebook, Google, to just spend on hardware and then to pipe the end AI to like their billions of users. I don't know, Zay, do you have like a comparison historically to, it's a hard question, but
Yeah.
like I know you read the tech bubbles papers a lot. Like, do you have a comparison historically where an innovator was disrupted in a similar sense? Because it seems like all of their moats are playing to their advantage here with the capital have, with the revenue they have, with the user bases they have for AI.
Yeah. I think it's hard to generalize across all the Mag 7 because I think they have different positioning, and they benefit from AI differently. In general, I really like the Carlota Perez framework of like technological revolutions and bubbles of sort of that you have, if something's a truly disruptive innovation, as opposed to like a sustaining innovation, then it's very hard for the incumbents to be the ones that capture it, just because of sort of the innovator's dilemma, which is, you have to sort of seppuku and like cannibalize so much of your traditional business by going after the new thing, that it's just very hard. There's so many frictions, like organizational, internal, to do so. Um, and
I mean,
and if it's
Google and
yeah,
OpenAI right now, right?
Google, yeah, exactly. Google's the best example, I think, right now of like a tough one there.
But
Where
my
if it's a
problem with
sustaining
Google,
innovation, something. Mhm.
oh, sorry, go.
No, I'm saying if it's a sustaining innovation, something like mobile, then like the incumbents can capture it and just like make even more money with it. And I think AI has some parts of it that are sustaining innovations, like, it's going to make ads way more efficient, it's going to make content way more addictive. That all benefits, people like Meta and Google. But there's some parts of it that are disruptive, I think, like where you have to build entirely new applications, where like the advertising model in particular is very challenged by AI, because like necessarily you want answers, you don't want adverts, right? Like you don't want the ten blue links. So I think some of them are like Google, I think, is the most interesting one, because they, in order to really build, to become an AI first company, they have to like seppuku their 200 billion a year revenue search business, right? Like you just don't want it's just like I don't use Google for almost anything anymore. Like I'm mainly just asking OpenAI, um, and I think like how do they adapt to that? And obviously they're leading in AI. Like Gemini is one of the best models, um, but it's going to be like a much more competitive. I don't think they're going to have 90% market share in AI. At least like that's not the base case right now, right? And it's also lower margin than like inference is just tradition. Obviously, we're assuming inference is going to be the business model. They're it's too early to say, but it's just lower margin than search. So I don't know. It's interesting.
But I guess I would push back and just say, like, I'm a Google bull largely because I think they will lose share, but I just think the markets that all of these companies are going after are 10x bigger than the ones that they've been serving. And obviously that's crazy to say when you think about the search and advertising market, but if you think about, the cost of labor effectively going to zero, then the markets that these companies are going after start to look really big really fast. And so I
I
think
agree.
that's the
I'm a
bull
Google
case
too.
if they can get their shit together,
So
and if you think about all the data assets that they have, yeah.
I was talking to Paul last night, and who's on the intelligence side, and one of the main concerns I have with Google is it doesn't feel like they're doing a really good job productizing their really good tech. Like, I don't use Gemini daily. Like, I don't feel like it's in my workflow, and I feel like the user just identifies ChatGPT with AI. So, despite me being a Google bull, and I love all their dozens of AI releases, I'm really struggling on the product side. And Zay, to your point, like, are they really going to throw Gemini and replace search? Like, that'd be kind of bearish, right?
Yeah, I guess my view is that you have to believe that they execute, but if you think about all of the touch points that they've had on you for decades between, the cookies from the ad side, the browser, all of the browser assets that's starting to look pretty interesting, Gmail, YouTube, Google Maps, I don't know, a gazillion of these things, like the workflows that we use at Delphi. Like if you can wrap all of that into an interface that's basically like a personal assistant and Android and potentially coming out with a hardware device, then I think they have a very, very strong bid to basically be the verticalized integrator that basically liaises on behalf of you with the rest of the internet. And that's what OpenAI wants to do. And I think on the chat side, they clearly carved out a really good position. But I still think Google has a ton of assets that are very, very difficult to replicate if they can manage to coalesce them into, kind of a single bundled offering.
Yeah, I mean, so does Apple though, and they're still fumbling hard, right? Like Apple
Apple
seems like
dropped the
they would
bag
also
so
be
aggressively.
Dude,
well
yeah,
positioned.
don't come in here. Don't come in here with Apple, dude.
I mean, Apple's by that same thesis, right? They just like own the endpoint for the consumer. Like they should be able to just be the main connector between you and like they should be the best position to build this, but they've just sort of fumbled.
I mean, Zay, to your point on picking the Mag 7, like, I think you outperformed just by excluding Apple.
Yeah,
Like,
at least right now.
what's the bull case for Apple and AI? you'd say? I mean, remember, they've dropped the ball on intelligence. They ship summaries. They haven't acquired anybody. They didn't take it seriously. Like, what would be the bull case for them?
They like acquire OpenAI or something, or acquire like Anthropic, or like, I mean, it's such a small part of their. It's like they could acquire Anthropic for like 2.5% of their market cap or something. You know, it's like, does acquiring something like that make Apple 2.5% more valuable? Like, it's a no brainer, right? I think the stock would pump like 10% on the day. I think if they acquired OpenAI, the stock would pump on the day. That's that's what I think anyway. But yeah, it's also interesting to think where we were talking about that before the show went live, like where crypto fits in here. Because for me, like high level, AI is sort of a bet on just an abundant future, like this or not, you know, or we blow ourselves up. But in the bull case, at least, it's like an abundant future, right, where we just have free labor, robots doing everything, like, you know, 5 to 10% GDP growth, and just, yeah, like these AI companies just both capture and create more and more of the world's value. And crypto to me is, it's a bet on debasement, but it's also just a hedge against like currency debasement and and uh and like all the sort of historically pretty predictable consequences of that, of like capital controls, wars, just social upheaval with AI sort of accelerating wealth inequality. And so I almost think like there's just two parts of like the, I don't know, like the Chris Cole Dragon portfolio. You know, you have like some crypto and gold, and then you have just the AI assets, and you're like the, you know, the bear case and the bull case for the world.
Zay, I have a question for both of you on the Anthropic point you brought up. We're seeing this a lot with the funds we look at, just the safety versus accelerationism debate. And it seems like Anthropic is 6 months behind on releases because they have such crazy safety. And the accelerationism guys like Grok and now OpenAI just release rapidly. And the thesis, I guess, is if you focus on safety, you could be way further ahead if the acceleration guys blow up and the government shuts them down, yada yada. I'm curious where you both land on this debate. Are you pro safety in the Anthropic camp, or are you pro accelerationism in the other camp?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think before answering that, I think Anthropic has like the best coding model, and it's not that close. Like, and people sort of are even replacing Cursor with it, which aggregates all models, just because Claude Code is so dope. And I think that's a giant market. Like, I think like, I don't, it's hard to quantify just how big that is, but if you can have like software engineering agents, like most of the world's value right now is created by software, right? And I think that's like more and more is the case. Maybe robotics will sort of change that again, but and so I think that's a huge market where they're pretty like ahead in. So yeah, I think that's super valuable. On the safety angle, yeah, I don't know. I went to we went to the Anthropic office, right, when we were in SF, and I think it's nice to have people like that are super smart, you know, pretty autistic, and very and really care about safety. Like, I think it's nice that someone is doing that, and it gave me the feeling that if you're a really smart engineer, with like a strong kind of ethical code around this stuff too, that's kind of the place you'd want to be. Like, they all are very serious, like they seriously care about this, and are doing things the right way. I think that's a cultural advantage that you just don't get somewhere like Meta, right? Where you're paying up for just, you're paying $1 billion, whatever, for engineers. So I think that's a moat. And then also, I do think at some point safety will become like just required. Like, there'll be some basic safety standards that you have to follow, like some kind of testing framework, some kind of like interpretability. You have to know what's going on with the model in some way. And maybe Anthropic is sort of, you know, ready for that beforehand or whatever. I don't know. But I definitely hated whatever their release was, where they're like ratting on users and stuff. Like, that's the wrong kind
Oh,
of
like calling the
safety.
FBI and when you
Yeah,
do the
like calling the
research.
FBI and shit. Like, I get where it's coming from, but that's like, yeah, I don't want my model ratting me out to the FBI, and neither does Pondering, for sure, with some of the stuff he gets up to with his models.
Yeah, thanks, Mom, if you're listening. Really love working at Delphi.
Don't check my computer.
Yeah, um, great guys, really great team.
We love you.
So so back to safety versus acceleration. Yeah, I kind of feel like at Delphi Intelligence, I'm at like a very interesting juncture where on the one hand, Delphi and kind of particularly our DAI investments have like basically leaned very heavily into, um, you know, uh, basically keeping things open and acceleration, and basically trying to pull things out of the big labs. So I kind of feel like there's a little bit of a tension where safety is like a little bit more authoritarian, and you basically just have to end up trusting that a very few parties make the right decisions, and that can be good, but it also comes with risks, right? And power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So there's a little bit of a tension between, hey, do we want like a very few smart people that we think are good to have an insane amount of power over the rest of humanity? Or is it better to take the, kind of roll the dice and take an open source, more pluralistic approach that lets like a lot more of humanity have a say in how these systems actually evolve? But that also comes with risks, and there will be irresponsible actors and things like that. And so, you're kind of stuck in a little bit of a catch-22, where clearly that, like any technology, it's going to be dual use and it's going to have incredible benefits, but also there will be actors that choose to use it negatively. And I think we just have to be cognizant of that and try and build systems where that becomes difficult, but not acknowledging that you will never be able to nip all of the risks in the bud, and you still need to go forward anyway.
Yeah, no, that is a good. Petey, you have like very unique a very unique view here, given how much time you spent in China and in the U.S. And historically, I think in America we always viewed China as a very controlling country, but they are releasing literally all the top best open source models. We're getting freedom from China and centralization from the US. Like, how do you view the China US debacle, or just in AI, right? Like your video model report you just dropped on intelligence, like China is really killing it across the board here too, not just in text-based LMs.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question, and there's a lot of ways I could take it. I actually just did a quick post on our feed that kind of touches on US versus China and the different approaches to AI and kind of the pros and cons of each. Um, but yeah, frankly, one, I would say China has been killing it. They have a ton of talent. If you think about AI researchers and leading AI researchers, probably 50% of them are in China or ethnically Chinese. If you look at the Zuckerberg list of people that he's been poaching from the top labs, there's a lot of Chinese names on there. So yeah, it's definitely not a shortage of talent that's holding back China. I would say um, their biggest, I would say politically, they are taking an approach that is much more coordinated. And you do have organizations within China that are trying to pool compute. They're trying to pool data. They're trying to keep things open source so their efforts can compound, across the major labs. And also, I think there's a very big focus on diffusing the capabilities through the rest of society, right? So into public services, into government, into their industrial base and industrial capacity. So I think there's like less of a focus on building, quote unquote, God or, the supermodel, and much more on, hey, how can we harness these capabilities and diffuse it throughout our entire society and economy? Whereas in the US, I think like capitalist incentives have pointed towards just like a fragmentation of efforts that tend to be closed because that is what it takes in order to garner this investment. But on the pro side, you get a ton of investment, right? And so I do think in the paradigm where the amount of compute matters a lot, and the US has by far more data center capacity than any other country on earth, those incentives do matter quite a bit. So even though they're fragmented, I would still give the US the upper hand, just because they have so much compute, and China is pretty constrained by their chips, their access to chips, and frankly, the capital markets that just haven't been able to attract the same amount of FDI and investment globally because of some of the policy decisions that they've made recently. And so that's kind of the interesting conundrum where China has less access to compute because they're taking a more coordinated approach. But the compute that they have, they are using quite efficiently, and they do have a lot of talent, and they're letting that compound via opening up a lot of their learnings.
What what do you think of the because there was this report, it was actually linked in BG Squared. It was really good analysis of like Chinese industrial policy and how that's worked really well for fields where you're going from one to X. So the innovation's been made and you just need to make it more and more efficient. And you have this, you throw subsidies at it, a bunch of companies compete. And, and solar panels obviously worked really well, electric vehicles, batteries, but it didn't work as well in fields where they needed to go 0 to 1, right? Like chips, there wasn't really a big success from the subsidies program. I think they had and the biotech was the same thing, and they kind of talk about this in the report. Do you think, yeah, is this unfair? Do you think China has done some 0 to 1s, or do you think it's a fair charge that like generally better at the 1 to X?
So I would say historically, for a long time, that was largely the case. I think increasingly that is no longer the case. Um,
Okay.
but I would say I think
And
that
what's an
on the
example you'd
fields.
point to where they've like truly like innovated, I guess, built something new?
I mean, I think there's like if you think about most industrial fields now, I would say like robotics or drones, open source foundational models.
Yeah, drones is a good
Obvious.
example, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, if you go to any emerging market now, they will like they kind of did leapfrog on cars, and they do have the best EVs per price point
Hmm.
in the world. Um,
But that's like
but
I feel like that's a one. I don't know. They made better EVs, right? But the EV was kind of invented by Tesla, I'd say, and then they made it much better, and like obviously BYD is crushing it. Would yeah, it's hard for me to think of an example of like true maybe DeepSeek, but that also seems like they found a way more efficient architecture. Again, I'm not in the weeds enough to know whether you could consider that a 0 to 1 innovation, but it seems like a way more efficient architecture, right? Which is what the Chinese are insanely good at. And maybe that's all you need now that AI sort of you have the transformers and it's just like scaling that up. I don't know.
Well, do you
Maybe
have to
maybe
be first mover
WeChat
to
as a
win then?
UX is something new, huh?
Like, Zay, are you strong that you have to be the first mover to win here? Like, if
No,
China is not the first mover, do you view them as not winning? Or
no, I don't think so. I just wonder how many more. Yeah, because you might need more 0 to 1 innovations in different fields to win, right? Or not. Like China has way more like power capacity. They're coming up with really sick innovations on the model side. Maybe
I mean,
that's enough
this is
to
actually
win.
this is I mean, this is pretty lame, and it's not really like deep tech, but I would say like anyone who's spent time in China's consumer internet ecosystem, like there's a lot that happens there that would never came from the West, right? And frankly, like
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
TikTok is also a pretty good
Yeah,
example
TikTok is
of
a great
being.
example too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like yes, there are, but yeah, I still think China is like really good at scaling up stuff that works. But I do think, yeah, to your point, in a world where software development is starting to get commoditized, then those variables do start to matter quite a bit. But I also think that China um, does have challenges in terms of efficient capital allocation. And so they can do things really, really good, but that also comes at a cost of other things that might not get made or innovations that might not have happened because they kind of crowded out the private sector. And they said, hey, we're going to build semiconductors, we're going to build EVs, and we're going to be the best in the world at, robotics or yada, yada, yada. But, you know, they're, that comes at a cost of other things that don't get funded, like, they cracked down really heavily on the gaming ecosystem, and obviously Nvidia started out as like a gaming chips company and then became
Yeah,
the most
it's a
important.
great
So you
example.
yeah, you can never like you never know the path that a lot of these companies will take. And so I am still
Yeah.
skeptical of like the centrally planned mindset, even though it does lead to some very good outcomes in China and in specific industries.
Yeah, that's kind of the argument of the paper that you can't direct 0 to 1 innovation, at least like incremental innovation you can direct with subsidies, but you can't. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty
Zay,
interesting.
what's your
Nvidia is a
take
great
though?
example.
Like, China seems like they're killing it on the open source front, whereas we're not. Does your views change given how open AI is in China? That you don't have to self-direct the innovation when it's open enough to let anybody sort of build and iterate? Does that change the view at all, or no?
I I think. I don't know. I'm skeptical. I've always been skeptical on open source. I think the only incentive to release it is if you're behind. Like I think once you're ahead, like I don't think the Chinese companies will continue releasing their models if they're ahead. Like the game theory just changes, right? If you're behind, it makes sense. You're like directly attacking your competitors. You're building an ecosystem around your thing, deflating the cost of these models, bringing attention to yourself, and they've crushed it at that. And clearly have the best open source models. Um, but the model capabilities are like behind the closed source labs, right? By like quite significantly at this point. And I think if China gets ahead, which it's definitely possible that they will, they're right up there. Then I think they would stop open sourcing. Um, I don't know. What do you think, PD?
I
It
well,
doesn't seem stable, a stable equilibrium, a world where the best open source models are Chinese. That's like crazy, a crazy state of affairs.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I do see elements to why senior folks in China would both like be scared of open source, but also simultaneously understand why this is a super powerful public good or has the potential to be a super powerful public good. Um, and so, outside of, like, to your point, outside of Meta, who was like, open, like spending tons of money to open source their models largely because they were behind and they didn't want to be dependent on somebody else. I actually think there is a case to be made that having very, very good open source models is like, incredibly good for your economy, and not having extraction by like, two or three juggernaut companies is something
But you
that
don't have to
could.
have like, especially in China, you don't have to. You could just like mandate that they can't extract, right? Like they don't have to open source them to do that. You could, yeah, I don't know. There's probably you can do price controls or whatever. That's the advantage, right, of being in China. Like open sourcing, I feel like the if you're ahead, it would just be leaking all those like advancements to the rest of the world in this like very competitive like arms race. I don't know. Um,
Yeah, I honestly, I have no idea.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to say, but clearly there's like insane. I mean, we've been speaking to a bunch of um like fund managers and people in China. Obviously, PD is very well connected there, and it's super exciting. I think it's definitely one of the most underrated, misunderstood areas in the West. And like, yeah, I'm super excited about making some investments there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a good dovetail to a question I had for both of you. Like we're all looking at early stage AI fund managers, we're looking at early stage AI startups in crypto and in Web 2 as well. And it sort of begs the question, should we just buy the Mag 7, OpenAI, Anthropic and call it a day, or can we see real innovation, right? It kind of feels like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Sol, and then altcoins in a sense. So curious where you both see like early stage either managers or projects able to like effectively compete with trillion-dollar companies, unlimited compute spend, mass data. It just seems really hard. I have my own
yeah,
views here, but I'd rather ask you guys first.
yeah. You want to start, PD, or should I?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, happy to go first. I would say, like, I do kind of see it as just different risk reward profiles. Like, I'm obviously quite bullish on large tech companies that have good AI capabilities in both the US and China. Like, I think there are a lot of returns on those assets, and basically having distribution and compute and plugging in new capabilities to your massive ecosystems that basically expands your TAM. Like, I think that will continue to happen. But at the same time, like, those companies are relatively small portions of their overall economy. And I think, there, for every Mag 7, there's 493 companies in the S&P 500 that are not those companies, right? And those companies tend to be a little bit slower moving for the most part, and probably less likely to adopt these new tools. And so I just think there's a ton of white space for very smart, motivated people that are building AI native companies that have maybe a lot less employees, that, have a bunch of geniuses in the data center that they figure out how to harness, that will also build really sizable companies that are very difficult to predict. And so, yeah, like I think both of those things can be true where, hey, big companies that have a lot of AI assets that figure out how to use the technology and also sell it to everybody else will do well. But I still think there will be a ton of pockets where smaller players that leverage these, basically these mountains of GPUs and these increasingly capable foundational models to build, novel services, can also build very sizable companies with a very
Yeah,
small footprint. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. Like I think um there was some point initially where I was like, maybe all this just gets captured by the big tech companies. They're like so perfectly well positioned. But I've changed my mind there, and obviously it's hard not to, seeing the pace of just, you've never seen private companies grow this fast, right? Whether it's Cursor getting to 500 million ARR, or like Lovable, like yeah, some of these private companies are growing at astounding rates. And I just think that ultimately the question you want to ask is, does this thing, are they like uh sort of excited and happy when the models get better? Like, right, is it a tailwind for the startup or not? If it's not, then I think you're fucked. You're sort of fighting the scaling laws, and you just don't want to be on the other side of that trade. But there's a bunch of of products that just get way better as the models improve. In fact, there are a bunch of people building things that literally don't work with the current models, but they're just betting on the scaling laws that the models will improve enough for them to get there. Um, and I think there's loads of stuff there, whether it's hardware. There's a bunch of people building different chip architectures. Like obviously Etched is probably the most famous one. Atomic Semiconductors. There's a bunch of others. And then one I'm really excited about is sort of the thing that's been in a derogatory way referred to as the GPT wrappers. I really think that the models already today can do so much more than what most people are using them for, including us. Like even the people on the frontier, I think we struggle to use them in the best way, just because of the missing, like, both context engineering and like just making products that make it easy to get that out of the models. And I think in every vertical you're going to have like multi-billion-dollar businesses that are just optimizing around a particular vertical, building a UX around it, making context engineering around it really easy, like adding your files, ingesting all that, and building like massive businesses there. um yeah, so I'm pretty bullish on the private company opportunity. I do think it's hard to invest in right now. Like there's definitely some negative selection if you're not deep into AI, where the deals you have access to. And I think one thing you get being in crypto for so long is just like a paranoia about your edge, right? Like you always want to know why you have edge in this trade, like why you're not just gonna get dumped on, like why, like you always are obsessed with that. And I think in AI, it's pretty hard to have edge right now. I think maybe China, like if you wanted to move to China and invest there, maybe there's some edge, although there's great fund managers there too. So I think that is a challenge, but there's definitely going to be, I think, some massive opportunities in private companies, and also the labs are going to do really well too. Like I think that everything is just gonna gonna go up. Like I don't think any, yeah, I just don't think any of it's priced in. No, nor could it be really.
Yeah, I mean,
So
one of
I'm
the things. Sorry, you go, Peter.
No, I was just gonna turn the tables. Tommy, you're always the interviewer, and I know you have a
Yeah.
lot of good takes as well. So wanted to hear, if you had any thoughts around kind of value accrual and the areas where you were particularly excited.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think a comment Zay made a couple of days ago in New York really stuck with me, that if you, it's hard to compete casually in all of these fields, like, and cover everything. Like there'll always be somebody who's hyper focused on outcompeting and winning in a specific area. And I think when you couple that with just the absurd, never ending overflow of talent we're seeing on the early stage AI side with the fund managers and with the projects themselves, I find it really difficult to imagine Meta, Google, Facebook, OpenAI, Anthropic, SSI thinking machines capturing every single vertical in a big way. Like we're already seeing Anthropic win code, to Zay's point. We're seeing XAI win like real time data. We're seeing OpenAI win like the general side, Meta on companions and probably social media dystopia. But like the long tail of people hyper focused on ideas is just crazy. It feels like DeFi summer, but on steroids. So yeah, I'm pretty bullish on the early stage side. I definitely go back and forth quite a bit though. Like when you see something like Google's I/O release with just 40 AI products across the board, topping charts for text-based LLMs, video, medical, and everything else across the board, it becomes exciting. Um, but then when you think of all of the startups that can use all of those in a specific field, I think I get re-excited. But long term, I think if we invest on the early stage side, we end up with Google and OpenAI stock anyway when they buy out all of the early stage projects. So we'll see. Yeah, so we'll see what happens on that side. I think we should probably talk a little bit about robotics, though. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, let's do it. Lot to talk about.
So we have the US, and then we have China's hardware dominance in Shenzhen. You could walk across the street, get any part you want in the world. So it seems like China is just universally winning on robotics. But PD, I want to hear your take. You're on the ground.
Yeah, I guess I would say like I think China clearly has a lot of advantages in terms of the supply chains and the components that, are built up around Shenzhen. And I think those agglomeration effects are real, and there's just a lot of iteration and implicit knowledge that comes from being the manufacturing base of the world. And if you look at what happened in EVs, like, I think there's very large swaths of that supply chain that are directly applicable to robotics. But I also think geopolitically, there's a lot of markets that will not be excited about having Chinese robots running around just for strategic and national security reasons, and that's going to be like a pretty big challenge for China, who's subsidized, a lot of manufacturing areas to try and outgrow their property bust, or at least kind of reinvigorate growth. But they have such a trade surplus already, and they're starting to run into trade barriers from their biggest customers like the US and the EU. And so I think I largely think that the US will have a domestic industry that services the US demand, and they'll have more global supply chains where they source like different component parts out, and then China will end up winning large swaths of the global South with very, very cost competitive, high quality robots. And so that's, I think, both markets will have large winners. I think in the event that it was just like, if the market stayed open, I actually think purely on price per quality, China seems like it would have a lot of very real advantages. But I think realistically, that will run into political considerations and trade considerations that will stall, the number of sales that they make globally.
Well, it's interesting. Like what Kang says is, and like clearly China is like unparalleled on the hardware supply chain side. When I spoke to Andrew Kang about this, he says that the Chinese companies just don't have the intelligence level, as in not the people, sorry, the robot intelligence level. Like they don't have the software side anywhere near as strong as the sort of big US companies, I guess Figure, Aptronic, and Tesla with Optimus. I don't know if that's true or not, or how you would even how we would even find out at this point. But that's his thesis, and that like robots have been around for ages, and they're really nothing without the software side. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Do you have any take on that or?
So I do. From what I look, I'm not a robotics expert. From the research that I've read, I do think that's true. And there are, companies in the US like Google that are pretty unparalleled in terms of like the brain, the simulations that they can run, and things like that. So I think it'll be very interesting to see, how much you can scale purely via simulation and software, and how much the feedback loops between hardware and software deployments matter. And I think both will matter quite a bit. And so, yeah, I think you're seeing several different buckets on the robotics side. Some is basically just like integrators, like your Teslas and probably your BYDs or your Xiaomi's. Others are like Google, and then you partner with someone like an Aptronic. And then others are like physical intelligence, where it's like purely software that hopefully can work with like any modular hardware provider globally. And I think it remains to be seen which approach proves dominant in the end. But if you look at kind of the recent NVIDIA robotics team, it does seem like the approach that they're using is a mix of as much video data as they can get their hands on, with as much simulation data as they can get their hands on, with as much like high quality real world robotics data that they can get their hands on, and trying to like piece it together, noting that the last part is in super, dearth of supply. I actually talked with one company. I talked with one company that was super interesting, but they were basically like a bunch of AI engineers that work with industrial robotics companies in Korea and Japan. And they basically, hey, we're the talent, we'll be your effectively outsourced lab. And they basically go in and help them to collect all of the data by just setting up like really high quality cameras and sensors, and basically go through what each of the robots do in a particular a job or task. And so like I think data sets like that are really unique, where you clearly need to have some AI talent, but you also need to be in proximity to the actual tasks and the actual like robot manufacturing themselves, to also do it really well. So I kind of feel like no one has the complete picture, and it'll be interesting to see which approach ends up winning. I don't know. Yeah.
I think that's a very good contestant. Like I think that would be a robotics company in the Mag 7 for sure. In the new Mag 7. Like
I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe a few, maybe even like more than one, as you said, PD. Maybe in the Mag 25 there'll be like a few of them. I think that's pretty likely.
The Mag 7 seems like such a slim number for the number of companies we're proposing replace what's in there. Like OpenAI, Anthropic, robotics company, that's 3 alone. Yeah, it seems like they're... Yeah, it seems like they kind of get completely replaced.
Well, hopefully Andrew Kong invites us to his private island once all these humanoid companies crack the Mag 7.
You got to frequently stay in touch with them. Make sure you get
I know. Get some allocation.
Yeah. Maybe let's cover what we want from intelligence, Jose and PD, for people listening. Maybe like across intelligence, ventures, and we can close out there.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, you start, PD.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess to me, it kind of seems like we're taking both a top-down approach on the research side and a bottoms-up approach on the investment side. And I think it is quite complementary to Delphi and kind of their networked approach to both research and investing. But yeah, I mean, on the research side, like the goal is basically to just dive deep into particular subdomains where we're excited about, and hopefully can surface interesting insights and investment opportunities, both for our subscribers and for the ventures fund that Delphi has in house. So I think in the coming weeks you will be able to get a flavor of the types of deep dives that we will be consistently putting out. Like we mentioned, we had one on videos. I'm going to have another one on data. We're having multiple on reinforcement learning. We're having one on AI browsers. Obviously, there's one in robotics that's very, very in the oven, Jose. And then on the bottoms up side, like I do think we've been working hard as a team about finding the right venture partners and scouts, in Silicon Valley, in Shanghai, in London, to try and like basically meet with entrepreneurs that are in the right circles, and then also build out our network of early stage GPs, both for access and kind of deal flow. So we can kind of marry those two things, where building up our expertise on the research side and going deep in particular subdomains, and then also kind of building up privileged deal flow on the venture side via relationships with early stage managers. So yeah. That's kind of the approach. Yeah. But Jose, feel free to tell me what I missed.
Nah, you covered it very well. I think for me, like I guess on a feels basis, it's sort of, if you read Delphi research from the beginning, you would not only be smarter, you would have done pretty well, right? Like you would have been in Bitcoin very early, calling the bottom back in like 2018, right, when Jan did that great report. You would have been in stuff like, you would have found out about Thorchain very early. You would have then found out about Axie super early. In 2022, you would have had Sol from Ceteris, right, at like $10, like a Bible on why Sol was dope. Like, and I think for me, for intelligence, it would be great if it was the same, right? Like, you're not just getting smarter, but there's actionable stuff in there that kind of can change people's lives if they to have them look into something that they wouldn't have otherwise, and potentially allocate capital towards it. Although obviously none of this is investment advice, but I do think that would be a really cool goal if in 10 years we had managed to do even a fraction of what I think Delphi did for people who read it in crypto. And obviously it's going to be free, so I think the impact can be so much larger, which is super cool. That would be a really nice thing to have happened, just to see us write about stuff early and then seeing it play out is really satisfying. That's what I would love for Delphi Intelligence in 10 years.
Yeah, I love that, guys. I mean, for me, it's everything you guys said. I do think that given how we started Delphi, even though we're not experts, leading experts yet in AI, I think we'll get there. I think we can look at a lot of these early stage investments from a pretty solid first principles lens, and are willing to take the risk in new people and new ideas that can really change the world outside the preordained views of like Web2 AI labs and what is the norm right now. So I'm pretty excited and hopeful that we can do that. So if you are that person, obviously get in touch with me, Zay or PD. And shameless shill here for these guys. They're starting a new podcast called 2035, which will live right on the Intelligence site. So right where you read all the reports, you can get access to these two Chads talking AI with some really smart people. So pretty excited for that. But guys, thank you for hopping on. I know time zones here are horrible to plan, so it means a lot.
I appreciate it. It was super fun.
Yeah, really appreciate it.